Okay. Can you hear me?
Hello, Jaap. Yes,
Hi.
Jaap, I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. I'm
Yeah,
sending
I
you a
start the
link now.
video.
Yeah,
Can
there
you
you
see
go.
me now?
Yes, I can. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. And how are you?
I'm good. We're already live. I typically wait, but we had some tech difficulties. But it's good
Oh,
to
you
meet
are?
you. I
Okay.
heard a lot about you. I heard a lot about you from our beautiful friend Sherilyn. She
Yes.
highly spoke very highly of you. And so I'm excited to get to meet you and get to talk to you, find out a little bit about you. This isn't a normal talk show. It's more of a conversation, just a conversation about what's going on and what's happening in the world, what's happening with you, what you're doing, what your passions are, and that type of thing.
I
Um,
love it.
I'm not sure what part of the world are you in?
I'm in Sedona. Oh, well, not really in Sedona. I'm in Clarkdale, but close to Sedona. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I didn't know you were over there. Yeah. It seemed
Yes,
like you're in
yes.
that area. I have to
We
look it
live
up.
very close, so that's why I know Charlene so well, because she has even lived for a month in our house here. So yeah, we know her.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's there's something to be talked about there. With Sherilyn, we stayed with her for 2 weeks. She invited us over for 3 days, and our arrangements didn't work out, and we ended up staying for 2 beautiful weeks and having nightly conversations, and we did about three or four broadcasts. Uh, just a
Yes.
just a incredible synchronistic experience, and I can only see the positives of all of it. Really, yeah. She came into my field on Saturday, and I thought it was just those normal thoughts you have about looking somebody up, or I need to call somebody, but now I know why. But it's all good. Beautiful lady left a beautiful legacy.
Yes.
You must have known her quite some time. Did you know her for a while?
Yeah, we knew each other since 2001, actually. And we met when my beloved Jeannie, my wife, was giving a workshop actually on the Sacred Trinity. And she signed up. And that is how our first time we met. And I was supporting Jeannie in giving her workshop. So it was very great because we also were very much into the crystal skulls, and she loved crystal skulls as well. And it turns out that we had a lot of similarities. And the basic similarities was there were a lot of beings that she was painting that I had a connection with, like Thoth, for example. So there were so many, you can say, similarities and connections. And so we became friends and connected a lot about many different topics and shared. And so over time, yeah, we have now a history, as the saying goes.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, I don't know you, and we're gonna get to know each other in
No.
front of all of our
So
brothers and
that will be
sisters,
the
and
fun, Todd.
yeah. But thank you for coming on and honoring us with your presence, and thank you for relaying that story about Sherilyn with us, sharing that with us. People, a big topic in these circles is the unveiling, the ascension, the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Something's happening in the world. It sounds like you've been pretty conscious for a long time, based on the work that you do and what I've heard about you. Can you tell us, were you born this way, or did you have a wake up experience?
Well, you know that often the idea of an awakening is, I always call it a reconnection. I think we basically are born with our gifts and our abilities because that's why we decided to incarnate into this world, to contribute something, to give some of our gifts and our uniqueness into this world. And it's not about being better or that kind of things. It is just each one of us are a piece of the puzzle and come in with our package of gifts to this world. Well, the big challenge
Yeah.
is that as soon as we are born, we come into a world that, let's say, has its pattern and has its limitations and his challenges. And what we actually often do is we choose to adapt to the situation that we are born in and where we are educated in, instead of really exploring who we really are. So you can say that a lot of the gifts that we have are initially not stimulated enough for us to bring them out. And there comes a time that we say, oh my goodness, I'm not happy with that. I can't be who I am. I can feel that pattern where I've been locked into based on how I was supposed to function in this world, that it doesn't give me the space to be who I really am. And then people begin to search for who they are and go to workshops and this and that. And then suddenly there's this shift in awareness where we make a deeper connection, and then we call it an awakening. But actually, I call it finally waking up from the sleep that we have been in since the moment that we were trying to stay, let's say, safe by fitting into the world around us. The problem is we actually often don't feel safe if we step out of the environment where we have been brought up into. And it is the courage that we need to have to say, I'm done. I no longer adapt. I no longer want to be who I am not. I no longer pretend to be a certain person. I really want to express who I am. And that is the beginning of a journey that for some people initially may not always be easy, but it is very rewarding because we feel more and more that resonance inside of us with who we really are. So if I look back at my life, and then I have to rely on some of the stories of my mother, who told me that I grew up part of the time before I was 5, between 2.5 and 5, in a forest in the Netherlands, because that's where I'm originally from. And, the Netherlands doesn't have many forests, but that was still one of the larger forests. And I took people out when I was 3-4 years that came to visit us because, people in cities wanted to go to the forest. And they were always surprised I could find my way back. So according to my mother's, one day she asked me, how come that you can find your way back? Well, there are no markers, there are just trees and that. And I was very surprised with the question and said to her, of course I find my way back, because the beings that are around here and the trees are telling me I can never get lost. And she thought that I was just making up the story. But I think that is when we are children and we are initially not blocked, but because I didn't go to school that early, you have still your connections with the world around you. And then we realize that actually you can communicate with every being, whether it's a plant, a tree, an animal, and use the information. But yeah, as soon as I went back to school, I was scolded for my ideas and I adapted in order to survive. So for a long time, I didn't have those abilities, seemingly not anymore, until there comes, and many people may recognize that, a moment in your life when something is shifting in such a strong emotional way that you step out of the patterns that you have created in order to adapt to the world that you believe you need to adapt to. And that happened to me when I lost my first wife in 1990. And it was like this shock brought me into the search of what is it that I really want to do with my life? Who am I really? And one of those days that I was in search, that is then people call that awakening. I think for me, it's remembering. And I realized that I do have the ability to feel better into the world around me than I, as a scientist, do. Because somewhere my love for nature resulted in becoming a biologist. I hold a PhD in biology. But I was never really happy with science alone. It was too limiting. I always had a feeling that I was put in a scientific box and I didn't really fit in that box. And now I call what I do metaphysical ecology. So it is ecology of beyond.
I saw that. I was going to ask you about that. Now, you, in your bio, this is when that period of time that you're talking about, it says in 1991 that you began to immerse yourself in metaphysical studies. And initially, these studies focused on crystal skulls, the human energy system, earth energies, and their interactions. And it says here you summarize these studies under the name of metaphysical ecology. Now, you came up with that term, metaphysical ecology. What does it mean? And the reason I'm asking is, where's the connection between the human energy system and even the earth energies into that? I can see the earth energies, but the human energy system, how does that tie into metaphysical ecology?
Okay, yeah. Well, ecology is basically understanding our home, the world we live in, and how we all interact within that home, to put it in very simple terms, right? So it is basically has two main things, and that is you can say the biological factors, plants, animals, humans, and the non-biological or abiotic, as they call them, factors. That means weather, temperature, electromagnetic waves, and earth energies to the degree that we can measure. That is how science approaches it. And being trained as an ecologist and having worked in Africa as an ecologist, that's what I did. And I call that a box. It's the box that defines how science says, this is what it is. This is the definition. And within that, often we already limited because we start working within certain definitions. And there was one thing that I was from the very beginning not so happy with, because as a biologist, you talk about life force. Well, life force is not measurable. You cannot measure life force. So when you talk about life force as an immeasurable thing, you actually talk about something that's not science, because you cannot really talk about something being scientific if you can't measure it, or if it's not measurable. So I always challenged in those days already to other scientists, can you measure the amount of life force that you have or another person has? Can you measure the amount of life force in an ecosystem or in a tree or in a plant or in an animal? No, we can't. Yeah. So it is actually pretty funny to realize that we talk about life force and we can't measure it. So that was the beginning for me. It's like, oh, wow, science has obviously its limitations. And the more I went into feeling, I felt things that, there's not to explain. And are we now suddenly having to throw everything out of the door that people experience that you cannot explain with scientific terms? Well, that would be pretty sad, because that would mean that you deny a lot of experiences that people have. Now, especially when you look at terms as consciousness, science doesn't know what to do with that. Quantum physics begin now to work a little bit with it, but what is consciousness? So there are so many areas that in our way of talking with each other don't really work very well, that we, as scientists, pushed aside. Okay, we don't know what it is. We don't know how to measure it. Okay, let's not talk about it. Well, that was not satisfying for me. So when I started to work with what is called subtle energies, the first thing I did was learning Reiki. And I remember sitting, because you get these hand positions, and I was doing that, and I got so bored. And I felt that something happened, and I realized, here I am, as a scientist, working with something I don't understand, and I'm frustrated because I can't feel it. Why am I not going to study it? And then I realized I bang into all kinds of limitations, and nobody wants to work, and that's not what science is studying for. That you don't get money for that. So it was one of the reasons for me at a certain moment to say, sorry, I may be a scientist, but let me go to also that what is not measurable, and that is related to consciousness. So it is that what is above the physical, metaphysical. So that is why I started the word metaphysical. And because I like to look at how things interact, because after all, I'm an ecologist, well, the next step was metaphysical ecology, in which I had one main question. If we have a physical system And in addition, we have subtle energies. And nowadays, we have the terms of meridians and chakras and the aura field. And we have all that. Well, if you are very sensitive, you can feel that plants and trees and animals have the same thing. How is that all interacting with each other? Is it not important to look beyond the physical into the metaphysical to understand the world in which we live? And can we not, by that understanding, create a world that is far more in harmony and go into a next phase of interacting with each other? And you can call it ascension, you can call it creating a new world, and all these beautiful terms that we have, the golden age. Isn't that all in many traditions, that longing to create a world that functions differently? But in order to do that, you have to step out of any form of limitation, including the limitation of science, and say, let's be completely open and let's communicate with each other from this openness, so that we begin to explore beyond the physical into the metaphysical, share with each other, and co-create together a different way of functioning that is in harmony with everything. So that we no longer pollute things, and we not prevent, let's say, people and beings to be who they truly are, instead of trying to fit them into a box as we do with our children during education. So that's how I came up with the term metaphysical ecology, and I am still very passionate about it, as you may
I
hear.
can tell. Yeah, no, I like this. This is really original and new. I've not heard any explanation like that. I love it. So first question I got is, so after you went into school,
Yes.
went into school and came out of the forest, and then went into the 3D or whatever you want to call it, the matrix or whatever, and then you came out, or so to speak. Now, as you've gone on this journey, can you walk in the woods and not get lost now? I'm just messing.
It may sound
But
strange. I still don't have back exactly that same connection,
yeah,
but I never get lost. And
yeah,
one of the
and
things that I noticed, to give an example, I was one day up near Flagstaff. We have the mountains, it's called the San Francisco Peaks. And I climbed at San Francisco Peaks, and on the way back, I realized, oh boy, I will be in the dark. So in the dark, that little trail in a forest, you don't see the trail anymore in the dark. But the interesting thing is, as soon as I was off the trail, I could feel I was off the trail. Because a trail where people walk have a different energy than the forest itself. And without knowing and out of necessity, I suddenly was able to do what I apparently did as a child. But I often, in my daily life, I'm too much in my head, too much in my mind. And then I suddenly am not this ability. So I go on and off with it. And I still feel there is so much that I personally can develop, but that's true, I think, for every human being. At least the recognition that it's possible opens the door for further development. If you believe it's not possible, you can't develop it. So I'm still
exactly. Well, the reason
sorry.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. No, and the reason I said it, I was, kind of having fun with it, but I was serious because a lot of people would describe that. A lot of people say, hey, I was born this way, and then I went into, or whatever you want to call it, went to sleep, whatever. Then I came out. A lot of people had traumatic experiences, similar maybe to what you had, something that, changes your life, gets you to thinking. And, but it seems that the quality of that connection isn't the same. And maybe that's not the right way to put it. How did you re-engage, as you went on this path and your awareness expanded? How did you engage? Was there an evolution in your relationship with these meta energies?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Initially it was more like a vague feeling, and very difficult to define. Sometimes it has an advantage to also be a scientist, because my first question was, okay, if I am not able to understand certain things, is there a rational explanation, maybe in addition to understanding that I blocked certain things based on beliefs and trying to adapt myself to the world and all that kind of stuff? Well, what happens is, and I'm going back to one of the most important parts for awareness, is our brain, right? So our brain, wherever the information comes from, and it doesn't matter whether it comes from our senses, whether it comes from, extrasensory perception, whether it comes from our heart, who receives beyond space and time, as we now would know, all that information, in order to be aware of it, needs to be processed. Yeah, it needs to be processed in the brain. So I realized that apparently there is something with the brain that makes that I am not able to translate, as I call it. I know there are energies around, I can feel them, but we all have those experiences that we do a meditation with a group or a workshop and go into some kind of a state and say, oh, that was so powerful. And you ask them, what did you experience? Well, sometimes there are some words, sometimes there are some descriptions, but it is the experience is far beyond what we can give it words. So what blocks that? Well, when we are functioning in our daily life, we are in what I call functional survival mode. And that means that we work in the brain waves that is our daily one, our functional, the beta brain waves. And that doesn't allow to translate those subtle energies. And now we know that you need to go to your gamma frequencies, which are a higher frequency, but you need to combine them with the ability of a meditative state, the theta delta. And now we begin to understand from a scientific perspective that if you do not develop the different brain waves through training, it is not that easy to translate the awareness. So once I understood that, well, I had my method, I said, okay, that means I need to train. And everybody can train. So that resulted for me saying to everybody, everyone is a psychic, if you want to use that word. Yeah? Everyone has the ability to see beyond, to understand things beyond. And actually, we begin to understand, according to quantum physics, that we are quantum entangled with all kinds of other states and worlds and beings and whatever we want to call it, and that we receive information, but we can't translate it. So there are two aspects. One is, where do you attune to? Where do you direct your consciousness towards? And secondly, once you have that direction, that what comes to you, how do you translate that in such a way that you can give it words and share it with others, and maybe even develop into a training so that others can train themselves as well. Does that make sense?
That's excellent. Yes, absolutely. Would you say that in your evolution that your understanding of what metaphysical is, meta,
yes.
What term did you use? But anyway, you know what I mean. The unseen, the non-physical.
Yes.
Would you say that the entanglement, as you described, the quantum entanglement, would you say that your view of it or your perception of it became much greater than what you might have thought it was in the beginning? Like in the beginning, it's the earth and the planets and then you start to realize that there's actually connectivity maybe to multidimensional aspects, timelines, that type of thing.
Yeah. One of the things that is amazing for me is that while I did that and begin to translate more, that I no longer can talk only from a certain perspective. So that means I lost a lot of people who think this guy is nuts. I don't want to listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make
You're
any
in good
sense.
company with all of us. Everybody here is in the same boat.
Yeah. Yes. So you understand exactly what I'm talking about. So
probably not to the degree you do, but
well, it doesn't matter to what degree, it's the process, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that is the point of choice. Yeah. Where you say, okay, do I stay in connection and adapt myself, or do you say, well, I'm sorry, I need to go my way? That is the choice you need to make. And I've very clearly made that choice. So what is happening is when you continue on this path, some people are coming in your life because they resonate with that, and you help each other to grow and grow and expand. I think it's natural for us to grow and expand. I don't know whether you ever have thought about that, but when we are born, there are two drives as a child. One drive is safety. The other drive is exploration. A child has an unbelievable need to explore the world, but it also has being in this still, let's say, non-functional or not optimally functional state. It needs protection. What is happening when you're born? You step into a world that has rules, that has limitations. And depending on your parents, they will tell you, no, you can't do this, or no, that's dangerous. No, not that. That's not good for you. And we have, as a child, to choose between exploring without limits or adapt. Because safety is the most strong. So what do? We adapt. And that's how we create the limitations. So when we get older and we make the choice and say no more, I want to develop who I am, we have to undo a lot of belief structures that ultimately, will then, as soon as we get them out of the way, make space. I always say we need to have the space for the new stuff. Well, once you go on that journey, there's no limitation anymore. We begin to discover, it gets excitement, and you discover more and more. And the perception of what you can call the metaphysical world, the metaphysical system, the ecology of that system is expanding all the time. So then you go, and then I was talking to the trees apparently as a child, but now I can talk to the trees in limited ways, but still that is coming back. And everyone can learn that. But you have to make the choice. And making that choice means you step out of a safety of having your environment that you know into an environment that is unknown, and with people that may criticize you and think you're nuts.
Is there an element of like begets like in metaphysical ecology? In other words, at a quantum level, what we put out, we get. What goes around comes around. That type of thing.
Yeah. I'm always a little bit careful with those terms because it suggests that it is a literal translation, right? And it's not.
Yeah.
We have to go to the essence of the vibration, So let's say if you are a person that is angry, has a lot of anger inside of them, yes, you will most likely experience enough in your environment that triggers that anger.
Yeah.
And there's not necessarily that there are angry people out, that can be, but it can also be all kinds of reasons to experience your anger. Because the world around you is a reflection, but it's a reflection based on resonance. So the problem with that is it is not literal. And that's why a lot of people don't understand the messages that the world are giving them and are not listening to these messages. They call it bad luck or whatever. And as a consequence, don't change or not enough. So messages are coming back. And the funny thing is there is an inherent need of our spiritual essence, our soul, to fulfill its purpose. And it needs to do that through this physical system. So it gives signals through the physical system. And if something is not in alignment, that the soul can't express itself, it will keep giving signals. And if it's not listened to, it gets worse and worse, sickness even.
I was going to
see
say
that
seems to be getting. Well, it seems to be getting louder and louder. I guess on one hand you could say the energy's reciprocating our frequency in a very benevolent way, and another way you could say it is the energy's gonna shake you up and trigger you until you listen. Do you think that well, let me see how can I phrase this question. Do you think that we at a minimum at least have an opportunity to integrate our energetic resonance into our physical reality? Like, do you feel like that the collective awareness is heading in a direction where individuals and groups or whatever will be able to actually physically manifest in a more magical way, maybe a more miraculous way, based on our perspective today, or say 10 years ago? Do you think we're actually moving into an age where this reality of our energetic bodies and energetic abilities will actually manifest? Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe. I think it's actually, to put it this way, it's inevitable. Yeah. Because for the very simple reason, and we go back to quantum physics. Yes, and I have my own slight interpretation of that, and some people call it the deformation. But I personally believe that there is an infinite potential. And that infinite potential is expressing itself in, you can call it consciousness fields if you want, consciousness constructs if you want. So I see this planet with everything that lives on it as a consciousness construct. And within that construct, we as human beings have our collective consciousness field, that is part of that. Now, the way we experience the world is in two ways. One is that our collective makes that out of the infinite potential, we experience this world in a, you can say, collective way. So we agree that there is a tree and there is a mountain and there is a road and there is a house. We can all, unless there's really something wrong with the brain, but we can all agree on that. But it doesn't mean that what we seem to agree upon is exactly the same for each one, because each individual person has its own unique vibration. So within the collective, you can say it collapses waves into reality that's slightly different based on their vibration. And that's why people sometimes argue, no, it's this way, no, it's that way, and almost bang each other on the head.
Sometimes.
Because yeah, exactly, because they don't agree. And it is because simply they have a different perception of things.
Yeah. So from a scientific perspective, what's happening maybe in metaphysical ecology terms? What is happening? What is download? What are downloads? What are transmissions? What is channeling? What's going on there from your perspective?
That's a good question. We had an interesting discussion about it yesterday. From my perspective, we all are channels. We cannot be not channels. But the channel that we are and the way it functions and where it's attuned to is depending on our overall vibration, which means the emotional and the mental, your belief structures state. Yeah. So we don't know, because I come back to that, a lot of what we get in, we never translate in an awareness. We receive a tremendous amount of information, but the brain cannot process it. Also, it makes selections. Now, the selection is, again, based on your belief structures, based on your emotional state, and so on and so forth. Yeah? So when I say that we are all channels, and it is a bit difficult to really explain without images, but basically we can say there is information coming in through the top of our head and from the bottom up through the root chakra, through the base, right? So those two are meeting and spreading through our system. So we channel information from the earth, which we need to find our balance as a physical being, and we channel information through our crown in order to be in alignment with our spiritual essence. So those two are supposed to work together. Now, if those two are not working together, the channels are not optimally functioning. Yeah? So we are not really a pure channel. We can choose to be a channel through intention of almost anything, but then we have no awareness. But if you want to have an awareness to become a conscious channel, yeah, then you need to have enough translation in your brain to give it words. But I believe that every human being is a channel, but we are often not aware of it, and we are very limited sometimes in what comes through to us. And we go back again to the development that we can do based on, you can say, transcending, transforming a lot of our emotional stuff and belief structures to open ourselves again to be that channel that can receive the information that we as individuals have agreed to bring into this system in order to help the system to ascend.
Wow. And so you've written like 5 books, right?
Yes.
I think you've authored 5. Okay. And so the subject of those books, I would imagine, is what we're talking about. Yeah. Is metaphysical ecology more of an, what am I trying to say? An explanation of the mechanics, the science of it, or does it have anything involving like working in cooperation or in equalization or integration with the energy that we see outside of ourselves, or say the non-physical energy? Is there any math to that? I mean, is there any a structure to that or explanation to it?
Yeah, for me, the mind wants to know, but we will never learn through the mind alone. We also need to go into experiences. Yeah. As soon as you go into something that is not directly measurable, it's something that we can call subtle energies, metaphysical aspects, we are sitting with, of course, a problem. And the problem is there is nothing provable correct or incorrect. Yeah. So we need to learn, and the only way to learn is when we share. So the most powerful thing we can do is sitting and connecting together with other beings, with subtle beings, with energies, and helping each other to expand our understanding and our experiencing of it. And one of the things I love to do most is to go out with groups in the Sedona area and bring them to what we call different energy spots, sacred places, or energy lines, or portals, or it doesn't really matter, what we really connect with. What matters is that we do connect. And when you do connect, it is your system takes something in. And in that moment, you're already changing. Because every time that you are attuning to systems that you don't know, it expands you as a being. That doesn't mean you immediately understand it, but you begin the process of change and transformation. So I love doing that. Oh. And because I've been working with it for so long, I know the different grid lines, the vortexes in different places, portals, doorways to star systems. For me, it has become over the years like as if I have learned a new language, I always say. So you learn to speak that language more and more because I spent so much time in studying it. And as you know, if you want to learn a foreign language, you have to put time in it and efforts in it. But ultimately, everyone can learn it, and one is maybe a little bit better than the other, but we can all learn it. So that is what I like most, to help people, to become more and more aware. So when I write a book, and you can say with exception of one, there's always meditations or reference for go use this meditation to have experienced such. So for example, one of the books is Gifts of Mother Earth, So it talks about the different energy systems that are on Mother Earth and the effects they have on us. Yeah? And that it explains how the grid systems work, but you don't need to know. What you need to know is that those energies exist. And then you can simply, through intent, connect with it, and it changes your life. Yeah. So when
you don't have to necessarily. You don't have to necessarily travel to that geographical location. You can actually connect to it.
No, because basically all those energy systems are everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There is a difference. Now, there's one thing is those energies are deformed in cities. We have so many overlaying energies that we cannot feel Mother Earth's real energies anymore clearly.
Yeah.
So you need to go outside cities. That's number one. And number two, in different places in the world, people have used those energies and call them sacred sites. So most of those sites that have been used over time are more awakened, so it's easier to feel the energies of such a place. The Sedona area has been sacred for eons of times, since mankind existed. And that's why it's such a powerful place.
I've been there twice. Yeah, I've been there twice for a few weeks, and it's a very yeah, it's a big cosmic doorway.
Yes,
multiple doorways.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a quantum aspect to a specific place. Like, for instance, I mean, if you take a place like Sedona, going with a certain belief system or expectation actually enhances, because it's more, I guess, in alignment with the energies that are there, or whatever, the memories, the experiences that are there from other people. Somebody asked a question here in the Zoom room, and let me go back to it. He says, how can we transform belief structures? And talking to you, and I resonate with you. It sounds like, and you can add to this or subtract to it. How do you transform belief structures? Is what you talked about earlier when you're a little kid. You have that unquenchable thirst of for curiosity for things, and is to open that back up, as opposed to erasing anything. I mean, just open your mind and reach out. I mean, is that the way you'd recommend to do it, or is there a way to transform belief structures that's different than that?
Well, that contributes, yes. But belief structures, are, ingrained in what I call neural pathways. Our brain, functions. The best example to give is if you drive a car and you learn to drive a car, initially you have to pay attention to everything you do. Because it's new to you. There's not yet, you can say, a neural pathway that helps you to do it automatic. So you train it a number of times, and at a certain moment, you can say, wow, now I got it. Now I don't have to think about it. Not even that, I can drive my car, and meanwhile I can talk to people. Not on your phone. Oh, that's a different story. Anyway, so the key point is you are able to create those neural pathways. So you can say the neural pathways are a little bit like water. Water is always searching for the lowest point, while a neural pathways you can see as the lowest point. So the tendency is to follow neural pathways. A lot of those pathways that we create are very functional. The car is nice. You don't want to think about, now I need to put my toothbrush up and down. No, you brush your teeth. It's all automatic, right? So we are full with this kind of things. We can prepare food and don't have to think about it. Not that it's the most optimal way, but you understand the point. So when we talk about belief structures, every belief structure, and I make a statement that a lot of people may not agree with. Every belief structure is a limitation. So when we hold on to a belief structure, we can't grow and expand. So the question that this person asks is a very valid one. How can we get rid of them? Well, the tendency is we have this belief structure because we believe that is the best thing for us in this moment. Our mind is telling us, hold on to this belief structure because it protects you. A belief structure is a protection that prevents you from experiencing unpleasant situations. So belief structures are always to protect you. That's why it's so difficult to change certain ones, right? Some are less important, so we can easily change them, but some of them are very, very, you can say, deeply ingrained in our system because we use them over and over again. Now, in order to get rid of them, you have to be conscious of it, number one. Secondly, it needs to be replaced by a different belief structure. You know, where do you want to replace it with? You know, if you have a no longer functional belief structure and you want to get rid of it, you know, that structure, because it's a neural pathways, needs to be replaced with different other links in your brain by thinking differently. So what is the key of change is the willingness to think differently. The willingness to say, every thought I have about this reality may be functionally or not, but it is never completely true because we don't understand how this works. So I'm willing to use it as long as it's functional for me, but as long as I feel that is no longer sitting well with me, I let it go. But you need to replace it, because otherwise there is an empty space in your brain. It goes back to what it knows, you know?
So a belief system. That's so a belief system, I guess, can be at different degrees of near alignment, or you might think it's alignment, but I guess ultimately what you've been talking about, I just say, you know, to thine own self be true. But if it's not true, it's going to come to a head. It's going to be challenged, I guess is another way to put it. But going back to what he asked, I mean, that's two things. One is being conscious of it and replacing it. So you're giving the example of like driving a car, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking of all the little things that go with driving a car. So there's like all these tendrils hanging off of the neural pathway, and you're saying basically when that situation arises, you take on a new thought form, and it creates a new neural pathway.
Yes.
And I guess the other one goes away. Does it feel?
Well, it becomes weaker. You know, this whole way is based on, and some people are now beginning to doubt whether it's really true, but it's called Hebb's law. Hebb's law said that neurons that fire together wire together. So if you repeat the firing of the same neurons, they get increasingly stronger wired, as they call it. That's a neural pathway. So as soon as you don't use it anymore, because you use now a different path, it also untangles again and it unwires because you no longer fire them. Yeah. So a lot of people say, I can't change. I've tried everything, you know, and it still doesn't work. And it's like, wow, that's fascinating, because apparently somewhere you keep firing the same things. Well, even the fact that you say, I can't do it, fires the same neurons. Yeah, because you're still busy with the same subject. Yeah? So you simply have to change it by saying, oh, I can. That's your first step. I believe I can. Already immediately new neural pathways are formed. I can do this.
I like that.
And from that,
because
built. Sorry?
That can be applied to anything. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, because so much of, you know, the stuff that we talk about on the show and so on, I'm not saying that it's complicated, but there's a lot of data. But this is something that you can utilize. I mean, you can break it down to that. That's really simplistic, is to say, okay, wait a minute, this isn't working. So the minute it comes in, I'm faced with it, or whatever it occurs, or I'm going to start right here. Here's the new path. And I guess we refine that as we go on.
Yeah, exactly. But the key is, you know, don't feed it by saying, you know, I can't do it, because you feed actually still the same thing.
Yeah.
So the first thing is always say, I can do it. And believe me, when you really go into that belief that you can change it, you get empowered more and more. Because every time that you then change it, it gets easier and easier. At a certain moment, you find finally that you are continuously in control of your life. Yeah. And that also means that you can see that seemingly the outside world is changing. It's not changing. It is that you see it differently because of your vibration that makes you see the world differently. So suddenly the world, if you're more in harmony, everything in the world around you is also becoming more in harmony. Not that there is not other stuff around you somewhere, but it is not part of your world anymore.
Yeah.
And you can choose to look at around and say, oh, there's something out of harmony there, and focus on that particular problem. Yes, and that throws you off balance also. But it's not your life. It is about your life, your choice, and your choices and how you want to act into this world. Will you contribute in a positive way, or do you choose to contribute in a negative way by being in a doom and gloom mode?
Well, if you break it down like this, it makes it pretty easy. But I think
Well,
this is
isn't
the
it
kind of
easy?
information. Yeah, well, I mean, simple. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
say easy, but simple makes it
yeah.
simple. God, I was just going to ask you something. Well, it seems like that this type of information is being embodied and anchored by more and more people. Now, you started this in 1991, at least this part of it, and on your own self curiosity, self discovery, and such, you've had this evolution. What's it been like to watch the collective? What's it been like to, I mean, you're in Sedona, that's a happening place, but I mean, as far as the collective awareness, the evidence of the collective awareness being more and more prominent, especially with the internet, has that been interesting? A lot of people point to 2011, 2012. There was a big shift and this and that. But I mean, have you seen something like that? Are you seeing an acceleration or expansion of the collective consciousness?
Yes. Straightforward, yes. Doesn't mean that we don't see a lot of stuff around us as well that seems to be totally out of alignment. But you can see it in almost every system that I've been studying. If I look, let me give a couple of examples to illustrate it. And I'm not referring, because everybody knows that nowadays on the internet and on Facebook and everything, you see more and more things about consciousness and expansion and change. That in and of itself is true. You see more movies, more books appearing, that is confirming it. But it's also measurable on a metaphysical level. Yeah. So if I look at the grids that are directly linked to human consciousness, in the time that I started with studying them, which was in 91, before that I was on my spiritual path, but not seriously on the metaphysical ecology path. And I studied those grids. What I saw was a shift to grids of higher vibration. They become more active. So you can say that the lower ones still need to be used because we are all of those levels, but we were mostly functioning from the lower vibrational levels. And I see a shift of expanding to other levels and other levels. That is one thing that is so obvious for me in the research over the years. And actually it started already very clearly in, well, let's say in the beginning of the 2004, 5, 6, I saw the beginning of a clear shift already happening. And I think it was moving towards the famous 2012 or 2011. Some people believe it's 2011. For me, it's a period, and you can say that culminated in that area, in that period. It was like a threshold,
Yeah.
And I feel that that threshold moves us even stronger into an acceleration of expansion, what I saw already happening before. Now, the other thing that I see is there are literally more, I come into a subject that for more people are some woo-woo thing, but besides vortexes, there are also vortexes, you can call them, that are linking into what I would call star systems. So we call them portals. In many indigenous people, we come originally from the stars. That is a belief structure that I find out is existing over the whole world. So even people, I did some work in Taiwan with Jeannie in 2005, I think it was, and I was brought to a place with the question, what do you think this place is? And I was like, oh boy, how am I going to formulate it? So I formulated it in this way. I said, if I would be in the United States, I would say this is a place to connect with the ancestors from the stars. And this Chinese man who owned that land, he was almost jumping out of his skin. And he said to me, wow, wow, wow. And then he rattled in Chinese to the translator, who was like, oh. And then he told me that in 1929, I think it was, they had the last interview with the shaman from the tribe that originally lived there. And she was in that interview, and he had the interview, that's why he was so excited. She was saying that that place was where they connected with their ancestors, and she even defined the star system, and the star system was the Pleiades. Well, there are many, like the Mayans, believe that they are from the Pleiades. There are several
Yeah.
tribes here that I believe they are from the Pleiades. So for me, that was fascinating. So it's one of the reasons that I continued to do the study of the different portals. Well, this is an unbelievable extensive study, and I wish I had a lot of more time to go deeper into that, and not only here, but also in my studies. But what I see is that there are new portals appearing. Now, portals are there to star system for two main groups. One is, I believe that the indigenous people are right. We originate somewhere from the stars and incarnated in this physical system to contribute to the, you can say, the ascension or evolution of this planetary system. That is my belief. So a lot of the portals go to star systems that brings in energy to help us to remember and stay connected with our origins. You know, a lot of people say, I feel I come from the Pleiades, or I feel I come from Sirius, or I feel I come from Arcturus, or Andromeda, or whatever people are saying nowadays, right? And some people say these people are all cuckoo. Well, maybe to some degree that could be true, but there is also a truth in that. We originated from somewhere out there and came to this planetary system to incarnate in this physical human being to express something that helps this planetary system to evolve. Now, what I see is there are a lot of new portals appearing. There's new information coming in. And for me, they're all the same message. That's the message of we move into a different phase. Our consciousness is expanding. More is needed to feed that in order to help this planetary system to raise to the next level, which you can call ascension or evolution, whatever you
like a macrocosm of the human brain and its neural pathways.
Yes,
making a new neural
exactly.
pathway.
Yeah, that's a beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful comparison.
So let me ask you. We don't have much time left, but I could talk to you for a long time. We'll have to do it again sometime. What was I going to ask you? Oh, I was going to ask you this. I'm just curious. So you're an interesting mix because you've got that scientific part of it, and I really understand that. You know, to me, it's like an engineer. You know, it's like black and white. But then you also have this other hat you wear, which is obviously your communication, your communion, connection with the meta aspect and all that. How, in your opinion, how much of your expressions in your 5 books of what you share, how much would you say came from like hands-on research, and how much would you say came from that intuitive umbilical cord?
Well, sometimes it's even not easy to separate the two, you know. Right. For me, is this the best way to explain it is to say, okay, I have learned to understand that I am a combination of a physical system and a spiritual system. Yeah. And for me, that's very important to understand. There are 2 different systems that need to work together. Yeah. And the only way to make that work together is through the heart. It's through love. That's the key of everything. So we can talk about all those different things, but if you learn to go to the heart, we will be guided to do the right things, you know, connect with the right things and so on. But anyway, when I go out into nature, for me, whatever metaphysical or spiritual or subtle energies that are there, they are connected with the physical system of Mother Earth. So I cannot really separate them anymore. The physical and the metaphysical or the subtle system is actually one dynamic interacting system that you find everywhere inside of us, inside a tree, inside Mother Earth. It is literally everywhere there. So in my way of approach, you know, I go to a place and, you know, the physicality of that location plays a role in the way the subtle energies are placed, how they interact. Yeah? sorry, I recently said to somebody, we need to learn to understand all those different grid systems because they are energy layers that are woven into a web of continuously interaction. And the physical system is an integrated part of that web. So the problem that science has is they separate. They separate that what is measurable, visible, audible from what is not. But in reality, it's not separated. It is totally integrated. And as long as we can't see that, we will never understand the world. So that's why I sometimes make this statement. And I say there is nothing that we say about this world that is correct, because it is only from a certain angle that we look at it. So that is the challenge, Todd, for me.
So we got to, no, I got it. I have one last question. I could go on forever, really. So what is the, well, let me preface it. I'd say a good many philosophies, schools of thought, however you want to put it, kind of de-emphasize the human. How important, and given the, what I think is a fact, our origins coming from certain planets and star systems or what have you, what importance does the human experience carry? What that the human aspect carries? How important? I mean, is metaphysical ecology? Does it emphasize? And there's no right or wrong, like you said. Does it emphasize the human experience, or does it de-emphasize it?
Neither. It is basically seeing the humans as an integrated part of an evolutionary process. So, and this is what I'm now sharing is a belief based on my meditations up in the mountains here in Sedona. And I don't know, I have no proof for that, but it feels right. And when I share it with people, people resonate strongly with it. What I understand from my communications with Mother Earth is, she said there comes a moment in a planetary system's evolution that the planet is inviting souls to what she calls co-creation. So the souls are needed to co-create together with Mother Earth to move into the next phase. So the co-creation aspect is an agreement. I feel it to be an agreement that we have been invited as souls to come to this earth to be co-creators. Now, and I make a very strong statement about it. Not to be more important, not to take, whatever we can take out of this system for our personal gain. No, we were here for the greater good of all. We totally went in the wrong direction. So what the whole challenge of this time frame is to go in the other direction, where we see ourselves as an integrated part of a dynamic system. In that sense, we are needed because we have agreed to contribute as co-creators to it. So let's step out of this arrogance that we are more important and see that we are an integrated part of that. And from a physical perspective, every atom that you have in your body is from Mother Earth. We are an extension of her. From a spiritual perspective, we are out of the stars. We are a part of the infinite. And those two, as I said earlier, need to learn to work together.
Oh, I like that. Good explanation. Very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'd love to do it again sometime. We get into a lot of different subjects here. But yeah, really cool. I'm really, it's a pleasure to have sit down and talk with you. And I look forward to future collaborations and maybe visiting with you in Sedona next time we go. So thank you for honoring us with your presence and sharing space with us. And I'll catch you. Somebody said Jaap for president. Peace out, brother.
Okay. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yes, it was. And best to you and yours. You take care.